Welcome all to episode 50. 50. Cheers to you and I, Oscar, I say.
Cheers, buddy.
Cannot believe that we have done 50 episodes, and sure, there's probably people who've done lots more, but considering it wasn't even a thought, well, it was a thought by a lot of other people, Property Avenue WA has actually cracked the big 50, so we'll raise our bat. For those that don't know what we're about, it's our Property Avenue WA is the focus is all about property in Western Australia. We try to be as broad as we can. We try to be informative. We try to be a bit relaxed. We have a little bit of fun on the way. And unfortunately, for those that may have been expecting a guest tonight, we did suggest to you that was going to occur. Unfortunately, our psychologist friend, who we were really looking forward to talking to, she had a directive from her company and they weren't fussed about being on media, and we're classified as media. And then we had a builder and we were going to discuss with him, but he's going to come back on next week. But he fell ill during the day, unfortunately. So there was a mad panic. So if you've seen a post earlier in the day where we were going to have a guest and then there's a change, that is why. So we do apologise for anybody that was ruined your expectations. He's certainly disappointed, as our Warren Taylor, but we're looking forward to Woz being back on board, healthy for one. And then he's said, TV, I'll be back next week. So we're looking forward to OD and I. I'm TV, he's OD, and we welcome you to our /stream/podcast. So tomorrow, for those that want to just listen to the audio and not all that fussed about sitting here staring, watching up the two of us, we are available through all your normal, wherever you may get your podcast from. You should be able to upload, download, whatever the case may be, our podcast tomorrow on Wednesday. And for those that don't have that podcast access, then I'm sorry, you're going to have to watch us or use something else. But we enjoy what we do. There's been so much going on. There's quite a bit to discuss, and we madly rushed around and rejigged our plans for tonight. And we've actually got some good questions as well. So the intention is, you may have seen the headline where we said, is the desperation of buyers creating, would you say, unrealistic prices from sellers? And there's a reason we asked that question. So we look forward to having a chat about that. Obviously, we've got Oscar's review and his stats. We're also making mention about we don't want to let go of what's been going on in the Midwest, and particularly around the traps. And I've certainly been exposed to that quite a bit over the last week or two with clients, and different questions being asked of me. But cyclone Seroja, which has had a massive impact on the Midwest region, and it certainly had an impact on the settlement process as well, I can assure you. But we'll make reference to that, and particularly the Mayor's Fund, but also the AFL Rams Community Support Fund, which is, they've got a Facebook page, and we'll make reference to that. And the other really interesting little article that I picked up on, sell first, buy later. Is that what really happens in the property world? Is that what's happening? And again, OD would be the classic to have a chat about that. And then, of course, we've got a few questions. So discover the answers to your property questions. We've got that little segment coming. And there's a few great headlines that I've picked up on, not necessarily all West Australian headlines, but we thought we might make mention of those. Maybe they're worth a chat, see how we go for time. And, of course, the if question. Got a little perler today, the if question. So look forward to all that. OD, welcome, mate. Great to see you, and happy birthday.
Happy birthday. Oh, yeah. I was going to say it's not my birthday, but good evening, Tony, viewers, and also listeners. Mate, I think you did brush past it, or almost brushed past it 4 minutes ago, and that is this being the 50th episode of Property Avenue WA. And whilst I am a co-host of yours and have been along for the ride for most of it, just about all of it, I just want to congratulate you, mate, and without pumping your tyres too much, but I really do want to congratulate you, because it's something that you are very, very passionate about, something that you really want to do, and 50 episodes pretty much means 12 months. It might be bang on 12 months worth of material, and I do come along as the co-host, and I do my little bits, but mate, you really do all the heavy lifting. You organise the guests, you organise the content, and I love being part of the show. But absolutely hats off to you, mate. It's a great thing for me to be part of. It's a really, really good thing that you've done, and I look forward to the next 50 and the 50 after that, and we'll get better, and we'll who knows where this little show will go, but I'm look forward to looking back as to the progress that we've made. In fact, I actually might even do myself a little bit of a favour when I get the time, and that is I might go back and find episodes 4 and 8 and 10 and just have a look at what it was we were doing and saying back then, and see whether we've actually made any improvement. That all said, it's a lot of fun, mate, and thanks for having me along for the ride. Another big week in WA real estate, mate. As you said, our show's all about all things property in WA, and that list that you just rattled off, TV, in terms of the amount of stuff we have to cover tonight. I can't wait to get stuck into today's shows. I have got some stats, obviously, and we can run through those when you want me to. But other than that, yeah, let's just get straight into it, because I think we've got a full 50 minutes, and we're probably already a bit behind the schedule.
Hey, okay, so how about we get stuck into your review and the stats to start off with, and then we can we've got some really good topics to have a chat about.
Yeah, cool. All right, so I'll get stuck into the stats very quickly, mate. Look, again, broken record stuff for me. A very, very busy week, both in our sales market and also our rental market. In the last 7 days, bearing in mind that we've just come off a 3-day lockdown, it'll be really interesting, TV, to see next week's stats as to what was the actual effect of the lockdown. Was there any effect at all so far as the transactions are concerned, or the real estate activity? But certainly in the 7 days leading up to the lockdown, no handbrake applied there at all. Almost 1,000 transactions again. I think it was 979 transactions. 12 months ago, we were just starting to come out of that initial COVID phase, and the world was or WA was returning to normal, and we had 397 sales going back 12 months ago. And as I said, just in the last 7 days, there's been 979. Listings continue to remain under 9,000 listings. It's about 8,737 listings, which is on the low side. It definitely is representative of low stock at high demand, as demonstrated by the transactions. And this time, 12 months ago, there was basically 12,000 listings on the market, which also was starting to just get a bit tight. And now we're down almost another 4,000 listings. So no, don't need to be an Einstein to work out that our real estate market has just got tighter and hotter. And again, in the rental market as well, very, very busy rental market. Another 746 rentals leased just in the last 7 days. This time, 12 months ago, there was 845 rentals leased as well. So very busy in the rental market. 2,740 listings available just through the Perth metropolitan area. And this time last year, 5,996. So almost a 50% drop in where we were 12 months ago. And we know that our vacancy rate sits just under 1% in Perth at the moment. So again, bit of broken record stuff though, because this WA real estate market it's a powerhouse. There's not much that seems to shake it. And just closing on the stats, TV, we did comment, I think it was probably December, about 4 to 5 months ago, and we spoke about where our real estate market was going, but we also we looked at the broader economic factors surrounding WA. We looked at unemployment, or rather the amount of employment that was there. We obviously looked at the job keeper payments and also job seeker. We looked at the price of iron ore, and we just the tourism sector obviously is struggling and is still struggling, but other than that, WA really it's going through a boom. And we made mention of that going back 4 or 5 months ago. I don't think there's any argument from anyone as at today with iron ore north of $180 a ton US. And we know how reliant our economy is on the mining sector. So the mining sector, the real estate market as well, interest rates remain at an all-time low. So WA it most certainly is going through a boom. It's just about what happens probably over the remainder of this year. And I guess we'll see.
Yeah, there's different there's different commentary about that, but I sort of wonder whether some people with their commentary is more to the fact of just trying to keep a lid on it a little, because there's nothing. I know the lockdown on the weekend, you sort of go, oh, here we go again, but it's sort of got to the point where you're going to expect that to occur. And it didn't appear to be slowing everybody down. The minute I went out I suddenly had to rearrange some appointments I had arranged to do in Perth, and with clients, and I had to rearrange those, and went out into the street, and all of a sudden I went, oh my God, like this was only, I don't know what time that would have been, 2 o'clock, 2:30, perhaps a bit later. But all of a sudden it was just as though everyone had come out of the woodwork, and you'd think it was 5 o'clock knockoff time, but it was far from that. And then you see the photos of people on the freeways and heading north, south, east, and west. So it doesn't appear. Whereas this time last year we were sort of, where are we going? Everything went dead and everything just shut up shop. Now it's sort of like, yeah, we're good with that. That'll it's obviously impacting on some businesses, and it was interesting to see those figures that they quoted today. Where they suggested something like $100 million was lost in the metro area with regard to the holiday dollar, if you like, the hospitality and the entertainment area. That's massive.
Yeah, and then also the Chamber of Commerce, the current WA chief of the Chamber of Commerce jumped on and said, I don't know where those figures are being calculated from, because his estimate was more like 200 million. So $200 million in lost revenue as a result of a 3-day lockdown. So, it's business as usual, I guess, for many, and especially coming out of the lockdown. But no, there are a lot of businesses as well, particularly in hospitality, gyms and exercise venues as well, that, they really do feel, you can't even call it the pinch, can you? It's a bit more, it's a lot harsher than a pinch, but they really are feeling it. And then they have to feel it even longer. Even when most of the economy comes out of lockdown, they have to hang about for looks like about another week as well. So it's something that we're getting better at living with, I guess.
We've got some people that are actually listening to us, and one Jody Bevan, as we both know, JB.
I doubt that.
True, and he's the manager of the Geraldton Community Bank, Bendigo Bank in Geraldton, and he just congratulated us on our big 5-0. But he also said, he made comment about the fact of he actually complimented you and said, great comments, OD. But his question was, will demand be sustained, and if so, where from?
In real estate?
Yeah, with regard to your comments you made earlier with your stats and your commentary, his question was, with regard to demand, do we see it being sustained, and if so, where's it going to come from? Yeah,
look, that's a fantastic question, JB. And look, thanks very much for the compliments, and obviously on the 50 episodes. In terms of what the future holds, at some point in time, and maybe it's 9 to 12 months away, at some point in time, the market does have to get a little bit softer, because we do know that there was a lot of stimulus provided at the very beginning of COVID. Let's call it between March and September last year. Sorry, something just popped up on my screen. So there was there was a lot of stimulus between March and September in the building and construction area, and we saw land sales go through the roof. We know that builders got ridiculously busy and almost struggling to deliver as well. And ultimately what that means is a lot of new housing. But we also know that there's not a great deal of migration. In fact, practically zero of people migrating to WA, certainly from internationally, and not as much from interstate either. So if there's not that many people coming in, but there's going to be a quite a significant increase in the quantum of housing, because there's lots of houses being built. Well, if people are moving out of the existing houses and are moving into those houses, surely that's going to mean that there has to be an increase in supply of housing, which should take the pressure off, and certainly the pressure that we're currently seeing. So unless something changes from a migration point of view, be it interstate, and at some point in time international will change as well, you can see it being a lot more sustainable. But right now, maybe there is a bit of a bubble there that is, we're going to see the effect of in probably a 6 to 12 month period. But that's me, just putting my economics and bit of a real estate brain on, but ultimately it really is anyone's guess. We just have to wait and see what happens in the second half of this year and I guess early into next year. You're on mute, TV.
Oh.
You muted, then unmuted.
Oh, did I? Am I good now?
You're good now.
I need a manager. I need a producer.
I think you need a hearing aid.
Well, I am getting on, the other thing with regard to what you're discussing, the other point which I have read a couple of times now, is where buyers become sort of exhausted, and I make that comment as well because our first home buyer, Kieran, contacted me tonight before we went on air, and he's been out today looking and had a look at a couple of properties, and he's got a couple of great questions that he sent through to me as well, which we'll do in our Discover the Answers section. But it's interesting already that he has sort of saying, well, he's had people suggest maybe you wait for a bit until the market slows down a bit. But, I think that could be dangerous ground too, because don't forget, we're also talking at the moment, there is no real guarantees of slowing down. That certainly doesn't appear to be the case. And of course, you've got banks and others that are predicting, and including REWA, I think a couple of episodes ago made mention that they were predicting the values could increase by 15%. Now that varies. There might be some locations that increase by 20 or 30%. Who knows? But we're still a bit of a way from that at the moment. So I think when we last had a look, the values I don't think they're as high. I don't think they've increased. Now, don't get us wrong. This is very generalized, but there are some the values in general have not got beyond the values they were in 2014. So we're still some way off because of what the market was like over the last 5 or 6 years, 4 or 5 years, whichever you want to look at it. But I still think that, if you're thinking that this is going to change sooner rather than later, you've got to be careful who's giving you that advice, because you certainly wouldn't want to be sitting around in 9-12 months' time going, oh, heck, now I've got a problem.
Yeah. The other thing as well, just going back to JB's question in terms of sustainability of current demand levels, and where are the people coming from, the WA market over the last 12 months has been spoken about as a really, really great place to invest, for the reasons being that comparatively compared to Sydney and Melbourne, our prices are quite low. We've got a very, very tight rental market, so the risk of vacancy is super low. Rents are going up. And then the final piece of the puzzle is that interest rates are so ridiculously low. So what we are seeing in Sydney and Melbourne, and probably Queensland to an extent as well, is prices are really rocketing. They're well on the rise in those areas as well. And for those people that aren't owner-occupiers that are looking to upgrade over there are people that are looking to make an investment. And with prices getting to such ridiculous, I shouldn't use that word, but rather extraordinary levels in particularly Sydney and Melbourne, those people, and including some of the investors that I'm dealing with and landlords that I'm managing properties for, they do look outside of Sydney and Melbourne as to where else is going to be a good place to invest. And WA, in particular Perth, is a really good place for them to invest for the reasons that I already mentioned. We haven't really seen an onslaught, though, of investors. I think it's fair to say the amount of lending dollars for, and JB would know, the amount of lending dollars for investment loans, as opposed to owner-occupiers, is well down from where it would need to be in order that we could suggest that, we are seeing strong investor interest. That said, maybe my views are swayed a little bit because I'm in the business of property management, so I'm really only dealing with investors, and I do see a bit of inquiry coming across my desk for people outside of WA that are looking to invest in WA as well. So I think that we will see an increased level of interest from investors outside of WA that are looking to invest in WA. And the good news there is that that will increase the supply to the rental market, which obviously we desperately need because we definitely have got a rental crisis going on here in Perth and in practically all parts of WA. Our rental supply is well short of the demand.
So we go to the next point, which is mainly our headline this week, is with regard to the market. Are sellers seeking unrealistic prices, and is that due to the buyer desperation? Is that how you see it at the present time?
I think that's a really good question, TB, and I think there's two sides to it. One side, and this is the I guess the instigator side that we've seen over the last 12 months, is I think sellers have been relatively realistic with their expectations, but in many cases have been blown away by where the purchase price finishes up, because often it exceeds expectations because the buyer demand is so strong. And that being, there's so many buyers for few properties, and just that competition alone and the FOMO means that the prices are actually getting moved up. So on one hand, I think that level of growth and increasing prices is very much buyer-led. On the other hand, though, I think now sellers have gotten used to seeing those headlines over the last 12 months, and they've been talking to their neighbours or the people across the road or the people at the school that got 20 grand more than they thought they would, or 40 or 50 grand more than what they thought. And then that starts painting a picture for them that instead of pricing their properties where rightfully it should be, they start to build in that premium into their pricing strategy because they want to make sure they can maximise what they're going to get out of the property. So, and then it's a case of, well, how far are buyers prepared to go to meet perhaps unrealistic expectations of sellers? But certainly my discussion with real estate agents, and I do chat to them week in, week out, there is a level of seller greed, might be a bit of a harsh word, but over-optimism in their pricing and in their expectations, which has been fueled by every other headline and every news story that they see on the news of how strong the real estate market is. So my advice to sellers would be, let the market do what it's going to do, but don't try and shift the market. Don't try and set the market. Be realistic with your pricing, and if there are that many buyers that are after your property, and also you've got a proactive real estate agent who's going to be working for you, let the market do what it's going to do, and you'll probably, in fact, in almost all circumstances, I'm pretty sure you'll be happy with the result.
It's interesting that you make that comment, because Kieran, our first home buyer, was out today and he rang me, as I said. He indicated to me there was something like 20 odd people that were looking at very enthusiastic about one of the properties he was viewing. And now, don't forget, this is on a Tuesday, not a weekend. And the place was, I said to him, so what was the property you were looking at? 4x1. What were you looking at price-wise? They were looking between 500 and 550. 4-bedroom, 1-bathroom, 500 to 550, which I thought, wow, considering only 1 bathroom in this day and age, and particularly a 4-bedroom property, I was a little surprised with that. So the question I ask from that, when we talk about desperation, is that also, is that influence being generated because of the buyer enthusiasm? Is that also being generated when it comes to pricing, is that also being generated by the real estate agent?
Probably. Probably, and look, not forgetting that the real estate agent's job, and in just about every single case, is to act in the best interest of the seller. That
Yep.
is the client for the real estate agent at the end of the day, and that should always be the focus. Is they're paying the fee to the real estate agent and are retained. The real estate agent is retained by the seller, and the obligation is for the real estate agent to act in the best interest of the seller. Now, that doesn't mean solely to get them the highest price. Obviously, price is a big factor and probably the dominant factor, but there's other conditions, and there's the strength of the buyer itself, and there's other terms of the deal that need to be negotiated that form what's going to be in the seller's best interest. The real estate agent should not be doing anything unethical, should not be ambiguously or untowardly talking up a property or talking up a deal. And I dare say in this current market TV, they don't need to, because that level of interest that you just mentioned on a Tuesday, where you've got 20 people going through a $5 to $550,000 home, the real estate agent doesn't really need to be talking too much up, because the buyer interest there speaks for itself. So, and that's very much the FOMO that we've been talking about over the last 6 months. The buyers don't really need a real estate agent to be talking anything up, because they're seen firsthand with the people standing next to them at the home open, the level of interest that's in the property. So, that said, the real estate agent still has got their professional obligations, but buyers do need to be aware that the real estate agent should be and will always be acting in the best interest of the seller.
And I suppose the other thing is, um, if it seems unrealistic and you're a buyer, it's pretty easy. Make a decision. The fact is that if that's unrealistic, what you consider unrealistic price-wise, then it's probably a good idea then to walk away rather than regret the decision making that you feel later on. Oh, but the agent said, or oh, the whatever, whoever you want to blame down the track. I've always been of the belief that we all have choices, as my wife often tells me, and it's one of those classic examples where if it seems unrealistic and you think, hang on, that's way, way, way above what I would expect to be paying for that property, then perhaps you need to go and shop around a little bit more and just see what really is happening, because maybe it is not as unrealistic and maybe it is. So that's something that as a buyer, I think you've got to be a little bit rational, and I think you've got to be aware of what you can afford, but also what you think is right and what is wrong. And that's where, you can't blame everyone else with your decision. At some point in time, you've got to make the decision as the buyer. And if it's unrealistic, as we say, it's a pretty simple decision then.
Yeah. Look, I think the other thing with that TV is that just like sellers retain the real estate agent to act on their behalf, buyers are perfectly within their rights to obtain, they can obtain a real estate agent, they can obtain a buyer's agent, they can obtain some other professional in the real estate industry to act on their behalf. And the whole idea of doing that is you're going to have an independent party who is independent of you and independent of the seller, that is going to be based on their experience and expertise, advising you as to what's going to be in your best interest and what's going to be to your benefit. The beauty about doing that is you'll have someone independently talking to you about how much should you be paying, or how many other buyers are there, to talk you out of that level of emotion, I guess, that people can get carried away with when they're looking at purchasing residential property. So, and it's not just having a sounding block. There's a lot of other assistance that a buyer's agent or a professional retained by the buyer can actually add to the property buying journey. So it's pretty it's relatively common here in WA. It's become a lot more common over the last 10 years. And it's much more common in the eastern states to have buyer representation than what it is over here in WA. But for those that have experienced using a buyer agent, they know the value of them. And for those that haven't, I'm not saying do it, but definitely explore that because it'll be a different ball game when you've got someone batting on your side, so to speak.
It's remiss of me, because it is a podcast, and we make reference to the general disclaimer, which people, when they're watching this, can see it. But, of course, when you're listening, you can't see it. So this is a general advice disclaimer. The information on this podcast is to be regarded as general advice. Your personal objectives, needs and financial circumstances were not taken into account when preparing this content. And we always advise and we recommend you seek personal, professional and financial advice tailored to your specific individual needs before making financial, property and investment decisions. And we say, get someone that you believe in, get someone who's expertise in that area and you trust and you may have a relationship with, and get them to assist you, rather than what we're talking about is very generalised. And we welcome your questions, and we keep on saying, by all means, ask your questions, and we'll certainly answer them to the best of our ability. But again, need to be very careful as to what you do and get that specific advice. I'll just go quickly to talking about the headline being about desperation. And we know our little friend, this is just a bit of a sideline, but our little friend Kieran, who's been on, and I think he'll probably be in a couple of weeks or so. We're going to have another chat to him with a bit of an update, how he's progressing. And so for those that aren't aware, Kieran is a young friend of the show who has offered to be a part, and we're following his journey. So he's already been on a couple of occasions, and we're following his journey as a first home buyer. And I can assure you the discussion today, he's suddenly realised that some of the things that we've been talking about, yes, it is a bit of a challenge out there. It's probably not quite as simple as you thought. But he did make a comment. He made reference to our headline, and he said, TV, just on a side note, he said to say hello to you, by the way, and congratulate you. On a side note, the word desperation is so interesting. In sport, it can be seen as courageous, aggressive, and imposing a will. It doesn't always translate the same when it comes to dating and other areas of life.
True, though, isn't it?
This is a 25, 26-year-old guy, and we keep on scratching our head whenever we discuss with him. We just love him being a part of the show. But that is just that's Kieran all over. He's just a classic.
Mate, he is. He would have to. How old is he? 25.
26. Yeah.
Mate,
yeah.
The most rational, level-headed 26-year-old I've ever come across. And like I said to you a couple of weeks ago, TV, we might need to look at getting some sort of a loose cannon or someone a bit more out of control, because, and obviously we're going to keep Kieran on the show because it's a great journey that he's on. But far out, he's a smart cookie.
Oh yeah. No, he said we love having him on, and I enjoy the friendship. He might be he's old enough to be, well, he's nearly old enough to be a grandson, but he is. But anyway, he's a hell of a fella. We really enjoy his company. Cyclone Seroja, and I thought it would be important that we make mention of that, and I don't want to. When I make reference to that, I don't want to forget what's happened with the bushfires either. And I know we're really busy, and I've got a number of guests that we've got on our queue, if you like, over the coming weeks. But I'd love to see how they're progressing with their rebuild with the Wirraloo and the bushfire. But as probably you may or may not be aware, but the Lord Mayor has a disaster fund. And it was interesting that I read an article in the West Australian, I think it was on the weekend somehow, and we're making reference to the generous spirit of WA. But it seems that obviously with two catastrophes in the matter of weeks, it was an interesting little stat that was brought out, and you know how I love stats, that more than $12 million was raised for bushfire-affected victims between February the 1st to February the 11th. And we're not, don't get me wrong here, we are not bashing that at all. We're all for that big time. But, I mean, there's only so much money in the kitty too, I suppose. But, however, in the first 10 days since the cyclone, just under $3.6 million has been raised. So it's a big difference. And certainly the Lord Mayor's Distress Relief Fund is and Basil Zemplers is the chair, asking people to really to dig deep, because It is, you idiot. What are you doing now? I showed you a new toy, and now you're going silly. Really?
How good's that?
Folks, seriously. Number 50, episode 50, and you're just making a mockery of the whole thing. So it's really, it's an interesting request. And they are saying there that they're really keen to, I think in total now they've got something like the fire destroyed 86 homes and left many more properties with hundreds of thousands of dollars damage. With with the cyclone, it's done unspeakable damage with over 1,000 properties affected. And I know firsthand, talking to different people, I mean, I've spoken to so many clients and connections where they've been helping family, etc., with roofs have come off houses and etc. And there are still properties out there, and you sort of forget that, but there's farming properties out there, and this is their livelihood, and they are trying to do their seeding, etc. They've got live wires, they've got poles down and wires down still in their paddocks, which is restricting them from doing what they need to do. And this time of the year, it's seeding and getting their crop in so that they can feed us. But more particularly, that's their business, that's their livelihood, and they're still waiting for people to get out there and do their
TV. Now, there's no properties still without power, are there?
I can't answer that exactly. I know there's still intermittent phone connection. I know I was talking to a friend today, and it just went dead. And then he rang me back about half an hour, and he said, TV, we're still getting disruptions with our phone connection and internet connection. I know one of my staff members, she lives out Chapman Valley Way, and it was some days after, in fact, over a week after we got our power, that when I say we, Geraldton community got their power, that she had her power back on. So I couldn't tell you that. There's probably some of the more distant places. But, we forget too that there's places like Perenjori, Three Springs, and it was interesting. I had to attend a funeral today of a friend of mine, and I caught up with a couple of friends there as well who are also farmers, and they were making comment where a job they thought was only going to take half a day or, be over in the morning. Suddenly, the further they got into it, the more they realised, hey, we got a really serious big. So there's a massive clean-up job to do, and that's going to be very ongoing. I drove past I'm in Geraldton at present. I drove past the basketball centre today, and there's still the SE, is it the SES, the State Emergency?
SAS, I think.
There's still Army and whatever still all located there, and there's bedding and everything there. So there's still a lot to go and still a lot to do. And I notice a lot of the AFL footballers, there's quite a connection of the AFL footballers in the Northampton area, and they have also got, for those that are interested, there's a Facebook page, and I chased this up tonight to make sure I got this right. It's called the AFL Rams Community Support Fund, and you can go on the Facebook page and follow that, and the guys there and the girls there. But the AFL boys, the Paddy Cripps and who else can, off the top of my head, I'm trying to think now. Josh Kennedy, Harry Taylor, albeit retired. What's his name? Hazelby played for Dockers.
Hazelby, yeah.
Paul Hazelby. So there's a whole heap of fellas there that are very much. There's a huge connection in AFL and Waffle for that matter from the Northampton area, and those guys are really it's their parents' homes, it's their family homes, it's the homes that they were brought up in, and they're doing their bit. So it's, everybody's make an effort, do whatever you can to help, because certainly if we can do anything, we certainly will, and we'll think about that. But if you can contribute in any way, over 1,000 properties being affected, that is massive. That is absolutely huge.
TV, one thing I did see on social media just on the weekend, must have been on Sunday on Anzac Day itself, was the Kalbarri memorial that they had in Kalbarri for Anzac Day. And I just I didn't see a video. I think it was just a still image, but then I flicked through and saw some of the comments. and it was obviously about the recognition of Anzac Day and Kalbarri having its own memorial, but then also on the back of what they've been through over the last 3 weeks, and that ability for the community to stand strong, and no matter what it is that has happened overnight or last week or a couple of weeks ago, you stand strong, you stand together, you're stronger together, and you basically get on with it, basically. And it was. I mean, those memorial services, whether in Perth or anywhere else, they're always quite emotional. And I did see some of the footage of some rather emotional ceremonies around the state, but that one in Kalbarri, for me, it was in particular, it was that just given what they've gone through, I could see a lot of emotion just in the image that I did see.
Hey, talking about images, I actually posted on our Facebook, our Property Avenue Facebook page. But did you see that image on the West Australian yesterday of that old man walking down the St George's Terrace on his own? It was just it really put a lump in your throat. Well, it certainly did for me. When I looked at that, I went, wow. But I thought it was, when you read further, how nice was that? And I know this is not about property, but this is about human beings and this is about people. But how nice was it that the police, instead of, could have easily said, hey, mate, that's not on, you've got to move on, how they, a common sense approach, they sort of supported him to finish his march. And then what I thought which was really quite amazing, was they formed a guard of honour for him at the end. Did you see that? Did you know that?
No, mate, I didn't. I saw the image that you're talking about, but I didn't read on. I didn't see any of the background to it. Yeah, so you've just enlightened me.
Yeah, no, that was just pretty special. And I thought, wow, a credit to those police officers that did that. But what an honour, because that day is so special to some of those old fellas, and to a lot of people. But certainly it means a lot. And I certainly recall. I know we're digressing, but I certainly recall going. I regularly go to the Vic Park dawn service. And there's an old guy there, and I tried to catch up with him a couple of years ago, and his carer took him away fairly quickly. But he always rocks up with a basket of apples, and he's got a green cloth over those apples. And when everyone lays their wreaths, he then goes and presents this basket of apples, and he unfolds the cloth, and I really hope he's still around, because I'd love to know what the meaning was behind that. But it's quite a moving thing. It's quite special. And if anybody does know what that means, I'd love to know, because it's quite special, really, really special.
Wow.
Anyway, so that's the story. So so the Mayor Fund and the AFL Rams Community Support Fund, they are two funds that are, and there's probably others around, but they are the major ones that I'm aware of. And if you can support the Midwest community with regard to these, that would be absolutely sensational. Now, the other thing being is sell first, buy later. Is that what's happening? Is that the situation? It was an article in the paper where they were sort of saying that a buyer's advocate was actually saying that, says the COVID recovery residential property market is moving so quickly, the conventional wisdom of sell first, buy later no longer holds. Is that what's also occurring in WA, or is that something that does happen in WA? What's your observation?
No, I was wondering whether you were going to, I was wondering how you were going to quote what that article said in terms of sell first, buy later. Is that what's happening? And my observations, and I'm thinking what that article has said as well, is that no, that's not what's happening at the moment, because if you sell first and then try to buy later, you really are creating a problem for yourself, or rather you're walking yourself right into a problem. And that is, if you sell and you need to get out of your house, the whole buy later, well, you've got to work out what you're going to do that in between that step of selling and buying, because if you don't match those two up very closely, then you pretty much going to get left homeless, because we know where the rental market is at the moment. There's not a lot of rentals available, and certainly not for that short term. And in terms of sale properties, if you're going to sell your property and then try and buy another property straight away so that you can move from one to the other, we also know that you're up a great deal of competition as well, and the chances of missing out on a property is really high. if you want to make sure that you're not going to miss out on the property, that's when prices start going up and you start offering more than the next guy. But if the next guy's got the same problem as you, and that is homelessness, if they don't hurry up and buy something, then that's when prices can move to those unrealistic levels that we spoke about. So, no, I very much think that the case at the moment, not across the board, but the norm would be right now, it's find the property you're wanting to go to and then worry about the property that you're in, because you can be certain that getting out of the property that you're in should be a pretty quick and easy task, as opposed to doing it the other way around. So secure where you're going to, and then the second step is now sort out the property that you're in.
Beautiful. I knew you'd have it all covered, and I was along those lines, but I thought let's get the expert to make mention about that. And yeah, I mean, it makes so much sense, doesn't it? I mean, that really is. It's a strategy when it's, I suppose, when it's a buyer's market, but in this current market, not to be. So, and as we say, we've got one of these unique situations in this market where it's not only a busy buying and selling market, but it's a chaotic rental market. So
TB, in any other time, and probably even 12 months ago, there would have been a case of, look, let's just sell our property and we'll just rent for 6 months. We'll just rent for 12 months. But that's not really, I mean, it is an option at the moment. It's a much harder option than what it was 12 months ago.
Yep. And we certainly had that situation with my son before Christmas, and I was panicking for him, thinking, oh my God, because he sold the place. Yes, let's get out, let's sell, and then got to buy a place and hadn't identified a place. So he was rather fortunate that did work out, and particularly pre-Christmas, not exactly the greatest timing, but he was very, very fortunate in many ways, I can tell you. Okay, I think we're quickly looking at the time. My God, we do go. We'll do that segment, ask your property questions. We will discover the answers. And we made mention of Kieran, our little guru. He came up with a question today and he said, TV, can I send you a question? And I said, I'd love you to. His question would be, for first home buyers, what are the concessional rates? He said, would you care to go through the concessional rates for stamp duty and what the minimums are? Because one of the things that he was asking me today was, where's he at with stamp duty based on a price? And unfortunately, in this marketplace, basically up to 430,000, well, not basically, up to 430,000, first home buyers to buy an established home are exempt from stamp duty. His question was, well, at what price range do we go? Because all of a sudden I buy a property for 530, 540, where am I at? The answer to that is up at 430, you're exempt of stamp duty. This is particularly for first home buyers, okay? But then when you get to, let's say, 450, you will still be paying, you will then start paying stamp duty, but you'll pay stamp duty at a concessional rate as a first home buyer. So separate to you or I, if we're buying a residence to reside in, or we're buying a residential property, you will have a concession on your stamp duty. But for a first home buyer, it's a significant concession. So for a first home buyer, if was above the threshold of 430 where you're exempt, then 450, this is in WA only, okay? Remembering this is a WA program focused on WA property. So for a buyer, stamp duty for a first home buyer for 450,000, suddenly you're up for 3,000, around, I think it's 3,000, and the printing is not very good. I think it's, anyway, let's say over $3,000, okay? And so that's the story.
It's amazing, actually, though, TV, because I understand that it's a concessional rate, right? But in my mind, I'm sitting there going, so the difference between 430 and 450,000 is $20,000. So if you are buying something that's $20,000 above the threshold, suddenly you now need to find an extra $3,000 odd for stamp duty that you didn't need to before.
Exactly. But it gets better. When you get to 500,000, so we're now gone from 450 to 500,000, okay? Your stamp duty as being the first homeowner rate, this is not your standard rate. This is the first homeowner rate, suddenly goes to $13,433.
Wow.
Right?
All
Now,
right.
remembering in this market, we're not buying the Taj Mahal, right? And this is where I believe, and maybe this is a commentary for another day, but this is where they need to review stamp duty, because duty did have at one point when the market was going nuts, that threshold was, don't quote me, folks, I'm sure someone ought to be able to tell me differently, but it was up near the 500 mark plus, 500,000 plus, right, where that was exempt. So at the moment, 430 is not a lot in the current marketplace for a first home buyer. But 500,000, suddenly you're up for 13,000. And when you get to, say, 550, you're suddenly up around about the 17, 18,000 mark. So
I don't know for the life of me if and I think you're right, TV, that it used to be higher than the 430. And I don't know when it actually changed from 500 down to the 430 mark. But I don't know if they're not going to do any other stamp duty reform, and they're not, because it's such a good revenue raiser for them. Why would they not just help the people that need the help the most in the first instance, and that is the first home buyers? I know that you've spoken about downsizers and people retiring to smaller properties and the stamp duty, like that's almost a separate conversation. But for the people that haven't made it to retiree stage, and for them to buy their first home, especially in the current market as well, why wouldn't you give them every single leg up that they can, given that they've still got to come up with somewhere between probably 10 and 20% deposit anyway?
the other thing Kieran asked me about as well is a bit of give him some idea. I've always worked on the basis that when people are trying to work out costings, basically work on 5% of your purchase price is going to give you roughly an idea of what you're up for, be it stamp duty, conveyancing costs, and all your other bits and pieces associated with buying a property, right? So that's your building inspection reports, etc. If you work on about 5%, that's round about the ballpark. And for a first home buyer, it's probably going to be below that 5%. But that's a bit of a ballpark that I have used, that sort of quick estimate for people, a quick calculator for people. If you're quickly just going to do you haven't got the specifics in front of you and going, okay, I'm going to buy this property for 500,000. What am I up for? Well, you're probably going to be up for around about 5%. As a first home buyer, you're probably up for around about 4%. Okay. And 4% means that 500,000 stamp duty is about 13.5 grand. And then you've got conveyancing costs and all your other disbursements. You've got adjustments of rates. You've got your building inspection reports, etc. You're probably going to be the best. It's probably going to cost you the best part of, as I say, round about, you'd probably get change enough to go and buy some champagne and put some steak on the barbecue for 20 grand. But if you worked on that, if you worked on 4%, but this is the first home buyer I'm talking about, you worked on 4% of your purchase price, that would probably cover you pretty much as to your costs, including stamp duty. So it's a fair whack that you've got to come up with outside your deposit, right? Outside your deposit. Another quick question, and I've got several, but we'll just work on two because I looked at the time. Someone's asked me that we bought a property, we're looking at buying a property for development. What does the zoning mean, R20 and R40? Now, who better to ask such a question is one Oscar de Souza. Far away, young man.
Well, the R20, R40 zoning, or basically any R code zoning, relates to the number of dwellings that you can, or rather, the land content required on your particular site in order that you can work out how many dwellings you can put on each site. So, sorry, I didn't word that very well. It relates to the average size of an individual lot on the parent lot that you can actually develop to based on the overall size of the lot. So I'm not sure that I worded that very well either. But if you're looking at a development lot, the R20, 30, 40 zoning dictates how many dwellings you'll be able to put on that lot once you redevelop the land. So R20, R30, R40, it might mean you can put 2 lots on there, you can put 3 lots, you can put 4, and sometimes you can even put more. You can't solely rely just on the R coding though, although that is the best judge as to how far you can develop a site. For example, if you had an R30 site, normally it's around 300 to 350 square meters per lot of land content that you need for each dwelling that you put on there. So, and I really am speaking broadly in terms of broad numbers, just as a bit of a hypothetical. But if you needed, say, 350 square meters of land content per lot, and you had, say, a 700 square meter lot, rule of thumb is you can probably get a duplex pair on there. You can get 2 individual lots. If you had, say, what did I say, 350? If you had a site of 1,200 square meters and it had an R30 zoning, which required 350 square meters of land per unit, that means you'd actually be able to get 3 units on the lot. If you had 1,250 square meters of land, and let's say you had a higher density zoning, like an R40 zoning, the higher the number goes, the lower the land content that you need per lot. So if you had an R40, which from memory is something like 220 square meters of land content per lot, you might be able to get 5 units on that particular lot. So it really just depends. And as I said, the R coding is indicative as to how many lots you can get on the larger site, but there are other requirements as well to do with the average lot size, to do with the frontages required, and the lot dimensions. There's a few other things that you need to take into account. My ultimate advice with that is make sure you get some proper professional planning advice if you are intending to redevelop any land, because professional planners have got a very thorough knowledge of the local authority guidelines, as in the local council, as to what isn't and isn't permitted within a local planning scheme. So the R codings can tell you often a big part of the story, but I'd never ever rely on that entirely, and I'd always engage a professional town planner. At the very least, talk to the town planning department at the local authority to make sure what you're intending to do, you actually can do.
I have also had some comments that I have been so busy trying to keep up. I think we need a secretary to stand alongside her so she can keep going what's going. And there's so many things going on. There's people sending me questions and there's stuff to do. Hey, but Jody Bevans told me about with regard to the relief fund, he's just sent a message to us to say he was speaking with the CEO of Community Enterprise Foundation today, and they're really concerned over donor fatigue, which is a bit along the lines of what this article said in the West Australian, across not just WA, but across Australia, following so many natural disasters in the past 12 to 18 months. And that makes a lot of sense, because those bushfires, people put a lot of energy, financial energy into the bushfires. Then we had COVID that came along and everyone stopped and a screeching halt. And then, of course, the bushfires here in WA. And now this huge disaster with the cyclone. So very interesting reference, JB, as to the fact that, speaking to someone who would know, being the Community Enterprise Foundation, the CEO of that, is making mention that across Australia there's donor fatigue. So a bit of hard work ahead, I would suggest. And if you haven't donated in any way, shape or form, then please think about it, no matter how small it may be. It would really be a benefit. The other thing that JB also made mention about is that on the power outage, many farming clients that he knows are still expected to be without power for a number of weeks yet.
Wow.
And I wasn't aware of that, but I wasn't sure where that was heading. But that's interesting. He would know probably better than I, speaking to his farming clients, but they're still expected to be without power for a number of weeks. And as I said, I know people who have got issues with trying to do their seeding because power's out and live wires or wires are down on the paddocks. And of course, the last thing you want to be doing is putting millions of dollars worth of equipment plus a human being in the wagon, getting anywhere near that stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, and just talking about that disaster relief fatigue TV, not forgetting, because there's always, there's some disasters that are big, there's some that are smaller as well, but, for the communities that they affect, I don't think there really are any small ones. In between Wooroloo fires and also Cyclone Seroja was Carnarvon and parts of the Gascoyne. There was some very, very heavy rains and flooding that actually happened through Carnarvon and slightly north of Carnarvon as well. And I remember there were parts of the road, like the rain and the water was so heavy and fast moving that there were quite a substantial bit of the main road basically between Carnarvon and Manila. Yeah, I think Carnarvon and Manila that was washed away. So, I don't know if there was any disaster relief set up for that, but that sort of stuff and the plantations through Carnarvon, that doesn't, switch back on overnight either. So, none of them are worse than the other. I think, you just rely on the good of humans and then obviously the state and federal government support as well to get through those rather tragic Mother Nature events. You're on mute.
True. No, I'm not. I was just lip reading. We won't go to headlines, but I will tell you that I will quickly tell you China creates its own digital currency, which is a first for a major economy, which is very, very interesting. Home builder time bomb warning boom could turn to bust, and that's something we're going to have Warren Taylor from Warren Taylor Homes on next week, all going well, and if he recovers, and those what sort of things. And first home buyers rely on parental handouts, and can it lead to bad habits? And I thought that's a really interesting little article we may use as a topic when we get Kieran on board, because the mum and dad bank is having an influence on the marketplace. So there was another great headline I read the other day. First home buyers age 40 plus double in Victoria amid the COVID-19, which was very interesting. Very interesting. Mm. Hey, let's finish up. If question.
Yeah.
It's our 50th, so we're allowed to be a bit longer tonight. This is an intriguing if question I've got for you tonight.
Hit me.
If you could not make your own decisions, right, but you could choose someone else to do so for you, who would you choose and why?
That's a very, very deep question, TV. Look, I guess I would choose, and I'll refrain from naming a name at this point in time, but I would choose someone that I'd be absolutely 100% satisfied that they'd have nothing, absolutely nothing but my 100% best interests at heart with every single decision that I'd need them to make on my behalf. And with that, I would think that the person would need to have a level of wisdom, maturity, life experience, and probably be quite a bit older than me as well in order to have all that. But someone that would not have anything else that would slightly influence their decision-making process other than what's in my best interests. What about you, mate? What about you? I know who you'd choose.
Well, to be honest, that question sort of was derived from people that have been asking me about powers of attorney.
Oh yeah, right.
Right, get me?
Yeah.
See, a lot of my questions are deep and meaningful. You say deep and meaningful, but they are connected with property in some ways. Not always,
yeah.
Some ways. But yeah, so this is really associated with the power of attorney. And the reason why I asked the question is that I consider that a really important part. We're talking about people buying and selling properties, but there's an area that people don't consider and perhaps forget about it, particularly if you're a FIFO worker or you've got a son or a daughter that works away and things like that. They might be young, but they can have accidents, and we see it all the time. And with COVID at the moment, I feel that making a decision as to having a power of attorney in place or an enduring power of attorney, then these are important questions to ask. And therefore, the person that you get, and you are all over it with what you're saying, not necessarily does it have to be someone older, but obviously someone who's got some life experiences, someone who you know will do the right thing. I'm certainly power of attorney for my dear mum, and my father put me in that position for him as well when he was alive, on the basis that I've certainly got two brothers, but sometimes family members get a bit their nose out of joint because, oh, how come he's been made power of attorney and not me? And how come he's made the decisions for you, not me? Well, sometimes it might have something to do with the fact of the background. Sometimes it might have something to do with the family as a whole. And certainly, as far as my family were concerned, the decision was made on the basis of my background and what I do. And sometimes don't get your nose out of joint if a family member makes a decision to choose someone other than you to be the power of attorney, because you know what? It is a responsible and can be sometimes a demanding role to play. And I think sometimes people forget that. No one's gaining anything out of it. When you make a decision and you become the person looking after someone else's decision-making and someone else's life, that is not something that you're just going to take for granted. And it's certainly something you just need to stop there and think before you jump over everyone else because they've made a decision to choose someone over you to make those decisions. But it's an interesting one. Yes, I know who I would choose. Mine would be my youngest son. And again, for all the right reasons, even though I have two older sons, his background, his nous, his qualifications, and his probably desire and willingness to do it, my other two boys are more than happy for him to do it. And that is why. But that's where the question came from with regard to enduring power of attorneys, which are an important part and people should seriously consider.
Good question, mate. Good question.
Do you like that? I thought it was a beauty for the finale. I've got one question here. JB's just saying to us with regard to Warren Taylor, can't wait to see that one. He reckons that will be a ripper. So looking
Stay tuned, buddy. It will be a ripper. Just another grey-haired larrikin on our show.
Yeah. OD, absolute pleasure, and I could not think of anyone better to celebrate our 50th. Cheers, mate, to you. Been a pleasure. Always enjoy it. Now, if people think the sparkle's gone out of my champagne, they're right. But cheers to you. Cheers to us. And certainly I have loved every minute of what we've done. It was an idea that you were one of those ones that instigated the idea and tried to encourage me to do so. And to share that with you and be a part of it on a regular basis, it's been fantastic. We would love those that are out there listening, those that are watching. Please continue watching and please send your questions. We've been getting some really great questions being sent through to us, and we look forward to seeing you next week. Please stay safe. Take care of yourselves. If you're out there buying, get the professional advice that you need, and we will always welcome your questions, and see you again next week. Please take care and go the Cats. How good were they?